And it can be a little messy. Can be a little messy, but typically you would do this outdoors. Now, I would like this to be just a little bit fuller. I would like it to be mounded up and curved on top, so that when I put the plastic cover on top, when it rains, it'll just simply run off. That's what you want it to do. You want it to shed water. And this one will, for the most part, but the bag is just a little small. So if you have some leftover potting mix from in a partially used bag, you can add it to this. But this is enough. It will work. Okay, at this point, you're going to put in the fertilizer. However, before you do, you have to know what you're going to plant. Because what you plant determines how many you're going to plant. Obviously, large plants like peppers or tomatoes, you're not going to put as many in. If you were to plant something much smaller like beans or radishes or herbs, chives, flowers, or whatever it would happen to be, they may be much smaller and you can plant a whole lot more of them. Let me give you an example of what you might plant in here. And by the way, this information comes with your EarthBox. So this is part of the directions. If you're going to put artichokes in, you would put in 2 seedlings. Beans, you can put 16 in. Bell peppers, 6. Broccoli, 6. Brussels sprouts, 6. Cabbage, cauliflower, celery, chard, 6. Cucumbers, only 4. I think they do that on purpose. Oh, he's having a seminar. Eggplant, only 2. Flowers, depending on what it is, from 6 to 8. Greens, 6. Herbs, 6. Onions, 8 to 12. Peas, 12 to 16. Spinach, 6 to 10. Tomatoes, only 2. Okra, 8 to 12. I'd like to see 12 okra plants in here, but I think that'd be interesting. Lettuce, 8 to 10. Melons, 2 to 4. Okay, now you'll get that information, like I said, with your planting kit so that you'll know how much to put in there. Zucchini? Pardon me? Zucchini? Zucchini you could. Now, with those things that vine and grow, like melons and zucchini and so on, you're going to have some place for those vines to go. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. By the way, if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to stop me and ask a question, or I'm going to keep on moving. So, okay. And today I've decided that I'm going to plant, this lettuce. And I have 8 plants here. This is actually romaine lettuce, red romaine. And romaine, we have had some here in red and in green, and this happens to be the red. So because I'm going to plant 8, I'm going to plant 4 in the front and 4 in the back. Therefore, I'm going to put my fertilizer in the middle. The plants don't go in the fertilizer. Fertilizer goes in the center. Now, if I were planting a large plant, and only 2 of them, then of course they would go in the back side by side, and then I would move to the front and put my trench for the fertilizer in the front, away from the plants. So the water is going to bring the fertilizer a little at a time to the plants. So you don't put the plants in the fertilizer. All right, and I've already said I'm going to plant my 8 plants in 2 rows. So I go back and just make a little trough like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is a 7-7 granulated fertilizer. It's not organic, but it could be. If you would prefer to have it be 100% organic, you could buy a separate organic fertilizer and use that instead of this. Put this on your flowers or whatever. This is balanced, 7-7-7. It could be 10-10-10. It wouldn't matter. You just don't want your numbers to be too high. And again, this isn't rocket science. Just pour it in there. After you've done that, you just cover it up. And now you're ready to cover it with the cover. Now, there's a white area, and if you lived in the desert where it's extremely hot, a lot more sun even than we have, or in Florida, you would want the white up to reflect some of the heat. But even in South Carolina and every other place, you would want the black side up. Okay, now remember those holes that I showed you? I'll bet you know what they're for now. Oops, yeah, there's one of them. Okay, that's going to strip over the water inlet tube. So I've got the black side up. By the way, I don't know if I told you, this comes with 2 of these covers. What happens is that after a while, the elastic tends to wear out on them. Okay, and now I'm ready to plant. I know I'm going to have 2 rows of 4. I just take a scissors and cut an X. And because we don't have any sand, no grit in there, I'm cutting into the soil mix, which is all plant material. It's not hurting my scissors. You could do it with a sharp knife. I think a scissors works a little bit better. Okay, then I go to my plants, and you should always water these before you plant. I watered them about an hour ago. Another thing, after you remove them, it's always good to loosen up the root ball just a little bit, not too much. Get those roots used to growing out instead of around the inside of the pot. And then you just take your fingers, reach inside here, and just make a little well about the size of the root ball and plunk it in there. Pull the mulch cover or shower cap up around it, and you've got one planted, and you'll repeat that 8 times. Sure. Yes. Pardon me? No, it's not necessary. What the shower cap does is it prevents you from having any weeds, and it also keeps the rain from flooding out your plants. However, indoors, if you have small children or pets that are going to dig in the dirt, cats especially like to do that, you might want to think twice and put it on anyway. But no, you don't have to. This also, out in the sun, this keeps your soil from drying out. Now, if I wouldn't have been talking, I'd be done with this. I think you can do this in about 20 minutes, probably set the whole thing up, especially after you've done it once or seen it done once. And whenever you transplant, your plants always take a little bit of a hit for a few days. They look like they've been wounded just a little bit. You're putting them in different conditions and you're messing with the roots a little bit. But don't worry, they'll recover really quickly.
Will the water wing all the way up to the plant?
Yes, yes. What you can do anytime after this is growing, like when I had tomato plants in mine last summer I put tomato plants in. I would pull this back and peek sometimes, because if you've ever pulled a tomato plant up from your in-row garden, they've got a pretty extensive, it doesn't go deep, they're shallow rooted, but I mean a big tomato plant will often have roots in a little circle about this big around. And so I wondered where all those roots were. So I would lift this up every so often and look, and it was just white with roots on top of the ground here. So they were just all over the place. Okay, now, this has been planted, and you know that whenever you plant something, you should always water it to settle the soil around the roots to remove all of the air pockets. This is the one and only time that you're going to add water to the top of the EarthBox. So you simply take a hose or a watering can, and you have a little slit there. The water's going to go down there, or all over your table. After this, you don't need to ever add water to the plants themselves in the top. You're never going to have one weed all summer long as you have this particular plant here. You don't need a hoe. You don't need a rake. You're not going to add any fertilizer or compost. You've already done all of that. Everything that these plants need now is in this box except for one thing, and that's sunshine, and so you have to be careful where you locate that. Excuse me, the next and final thing I would do now is to put this in its location, its final location, and then I would add the water, and it's going to hold 3 gallons of water. Water weighs about 8 pounds a gallon, so you're adding about 25 pounds to the box. So that's why I prefer to get it to where I want it before I move it. And it's even heavy the way it is.